Yes, everybody, we are back for another edition of our Three Things post-game podcast. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. And AJ, you were in the Spectrum Center, as I'm sure most people can tell by that really nice backdrop, I may add. I'm a big fan of that. That's one of the best I think we've had on the show.
Jumpman Invitational is always sharp court too.
Yeah, man, it looks good. I mean, I do like the branding. I do like the branding they have for it. It does look nice. To go off track.
Used to somewhat branding because you never know. Maybe the Dean Dome will be adorned with it sometime soon. Hint, or maybe not.
Or maybe not. Well, the only time
I've got a drop. I'm going to tease. I got a drop coming up in a few days, a couple of days. I'm going to talk about that. And I got a piece coming up. And before we get going, I'm decided I've gotten a lot of criticism for waiting till the end sometimes when I do this. We're looking for sponsors for our podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Holler at us.
We're looking for sponsors, not just for podcasts, but sponsors on the site. If you want to join forces with us, you can become somewhat of an insider too. It's not like I won't tell you a couple of things. Come join forces. We can help you. You can help us. And we're at 18,000 subscribers now on the channel alone. Yeah. We got a lot of different platforms, a lot of people following us. So come join forces. thimedia@yahoo.com. Send an email, thimedia@yahoo.com. I will handle that. I will be in touch with you, even if you want to just say, hey, and who knows, if you have a business, maybe we can do some advertising stuff. We need to continue to grow, and it will help us grow. We toss all that right back in the business so we can continue to do even better work than we already have. So I'm not plugging anything, I'm just saying, hey, let's help each other out.
Yeah, no, for sure. You're absolutely right. Just hit 18,000 today, actually. So a nice little milestone. 20 coming soon that we can, with your guys' help, we can get there. So hit that subscribe button right now so we can get there sooner rather than later. But AJ, we're here to talk Carolina's 90-84 loss to 7th-ranked Florida in the Jumpman Invitational. Another night to forget it against North Carolina. Dropped 0-4 against ranked teams this season, 6-5 on the year. Just to go through some stats real quick. A big night from R.J. Davis, 29 points, 8 rebounds for him. Ian Jackson, Elliot Cadeau, and Seth Tribble all pitched in with 11 points. Big second half from Ian Jackson. Really saw some of that talent shine through tonight, but ultimately wasn't enough. And AJ, we got to start. We got to go all the way back to the beginning. And this is not the first time we've done this season. This is not the second time. This is probably not the third or fourth time we've done this season, but it's just a bad, slow start for North Carolina. Again, fell behind by as many as 17 points in the second half, down 12 at the break. And once again, when you're playing these good teams, this is, a top 10 ranked Florida team, undefeated on the season coming into tonight. You can't dig yourself in a hole like that. And we'll talk about the comeback in the second half because it was an impressive comeback from the Tar Heels. Again, it wasn't enough in the end. So, it is what it is. But you asked Hubert about it too, and I'll let you talk about it, but you keep coming out to these slow starts, and it's something you've mentioned. You got to keep relying on these halftime speeches to motivate your team and get ready to play. And we saw a completely different shift in energy and intensity to start the second half, which, no surprise, helped Carolina get back in the game. But what do you make of these slow starts, man? At one point, it's like, okay, this is a problem. This is a trend that's not great. At this point, this is kind of just who this team is through 11 games. And I don't know, man, it's just, you can't dig yourself in holes like that and expect to win games against good teams.
Let me respond by asking you a question, and we'll go from there. R.J. Davis said tonight when I was talking to him about this, and it was a nice exchange, and you can catch that on our channel here as well. It was about the issues. And he said he likened it to when you know the answers to the test, but then you take the test and you don't know the answers. And you walk out, I'm paraphrasing here. I said, R.J., that's test anxiety. Mm-hmm. I can identify with that back in the day. Test anxiety.
The only one.
So I said, so is there a realm of anxiety with you guys that a couple of things happen and you look around and nobody's got that spark to end it, and there's anxiety almost as if this is going to keep going. It's just going to keep unraveling. Mm-hmm. Seth Trimble told us a couple weeks ago, I think it was after the Alabama game, that he sensed that the team, not that they go in saying the opponent's going to get off the huge start in the first half, we're going to fall down a lot. But when it starts to happen, there's almost like, oh, yeah, this is part of the script. And when you get into that realm, to that point, that is incredibly damaging because that's headspace stuff. And RJ's he didn't use headspace tonight, but in the previous few games, talking to him afterward, he used headspace. There's a lot of headspace issues with this club. And I think that he kind of said it himself. when he said that it's like taking a test, you know the answers, but you don't answer the questions. That's test anxiety. There is an anxiety with this team because you can see him get tight. I asked Hubert that. I asked Hubert afterward, and he kind of squinted, and I had to make sure I was saying the right words because you never know how they're going to hear stuff. I said, is there almost a sense of helplessness? Because he's had a couple different starting lineups. He's gone to rotating, subbing earlier in games and getting everybody sweating early in games to try to prevent this from happening. He paused for 5 seconds because I don't think any of them truly know how to fix it. Mm-hmm. You can identify the problem. That's great. Like in politics, everybody loves to talk about what's wrong with the other guy. You can identify weaknesses, but very few politicians have solutions, which is why we go crazy every 4 years, right? So in this situation, we have all identified the problem. There's not one person watching this right now that doesn't know that they're horrible in the first half and long stretches. They don't defend, they don't hit shots. They're actually been a much better rebounding team than people realize, and I think than maybe some people expected coming in. That's not their killer. That's not what's killing this team. It's their inability to defend, their inability to run half-court offense, their inability to make shots. That's basketball right there. Yeah. So we all know that's a problem. We all know that in a lot of these games, Kansas took the lead. Michigan State took the lead. Tonight took the lead, and then they lose late. They don't close well. We're going to talk about the close here in a minute. That's it. That's North Carolina. That's what they are. So how does it get fixed? Is it a leader to smack fannies? I don't think they have any fanny smackers. RJ said that Hubert said the same thing he always does at halftime. Hubert said he said the same thing he always does at halftime, and somehow they get a spark. It's like their back has to get so far against the wall, and they allow themselves to exhale, and they look around and say, cool, let's go out and do something about this. And I think Florida helped them, to be honest with you. Florida was very passive at the start of the second half. Kind of cracked open the door, and to Carolina's credit, they went through, just like Kansas was 6 weeks ago. But this is a common problem. They trailed American 18-13. They trailed Elon like 17-11, 17-12. Georgia Tech was out front. I mean, it is a screwed up psychology for this team in the first half that it just happens. It happens against good teams. They have trailed every non-conference power conference team they've played by double digits in the first half. And Dayton was up to like 19 at the half, and Dayton should be, I've been saying for a while, I'm pitching Dayton for the Big East. They should be in the Big East. It's a power conference program. They invest a ton in basketball there. It's a program. So it happens every time, and nobody knows. Nobody knows how to fix it. You kind of know why from a basketball sense, but you don't know why from a psychological sense. And until that gets fixed, it's going to keep happening. They got UCLA Saturday. UCLA is going to be up 25-12. Would anybody be surprised if that happens?
No.
Would you be surprised if Carolina's up 25-12 on Saturday? Yes, we all would.
Yeah.
So this is it. Of all the things that need to be fixed with this team, this is what must get fixed first. And I don't know if they have any solution for it, if they know how to fix it, because they say they don't know. That is a common theme tonight after the game. I don't know. Yeah,
that's not where you want to be through 11 games, to say the least. You don't want this theme following you around, and if you have a theme following you around, you don't want it to be a bad theme, and B, you don't want anybody, when you're asked about it, to be like, well, I don't really know how we fix this. That's not a good position to be in.
Why don't you close out on shooters in the first? Florida was 5 for 8 from 3 to start the game. Carolina was 0 for 11. Carolina was 2 for 8 on layups to start the game. Mm-hmm. And Florida's getting uncontested stuff. But then in the second half, everybody's defending.
Yeah. Let's talk about the second half. That's the second thing we're going to talk about, funny enough, but you've mentioned it here because I'm sure it was just as evident. It had to be probably even more evident in person than it was on TV watching it. But again, it was like a light switch flipped. It wasn't like this light switch is just Carolina magically starts hitting shots and magically starts doing this and that. Of course, that played into the run, what was it, 11-0 run to start the second half. But the biggest thing was, it was like, oh, okay, like this team just looks like they want to be here right now. Like this team just looks like they want to play right now. This team is playing with that intensity and playing with that kind of speed and fight that you'd expect from them that they so often don't start games with. So Of course, it culminates in a run. I do agree. I didn't think Florida was great, and I think they, like you mentioned, cracked the door open, and Carolina sprinted through it. You got to give Carolina credit for that. But it's so many of Carolina's issues at times, I think, and not all of them, but can be fixed when you actually go out there and you play aggressive defense, and you go out there and you look like and play and act like you want to be there. And why Carolina can't, I'll use the word, just show up to games, because I think that's the most easiest way to describe it. That is the problem right now. But it's also a kind of a problem too when you're like, well, they get chewed out at halftime and then they go out there and play better. It's like that shouldn't be what your team has to do to get motivated. You shouldn't have to be down 17 in a first half in a game, not, in Charlotte, home crowd kind of around you. That shouldn't be the catalyst, after a halftime break for you guys to go out there and play better. So that's a problem. What do you make of, again, you have to give credit for Carolina coming back into it, but they didn't close it like they needed to. They were poor in the last few minutes. Florida in on the 8-0 run. What did you make of the second half? Because again, it just felt like the team was like, oh, there they are. They look like they want to be here now.
This might be a terrible analogy, but I'm gonna offer it anyway. And I'm also due the Liquids. I feel like I'm at Memphis again with nothing to do. These NBA arenas. So, were you a messy kid? Were you a messy middle schooler? I was Oscar. If anybody knows the Odd Couple, I was Oscar Madison. My room was a colossal disaster. It would have been condemned by the government. So most kids are messy, like in middle school. And let's say you have a deadline by the end of the weekend, you have to get your room cleaned up. And mom and dad have to approve. And 6 o'clock is coming, and it's like 4:30. And you're not going to do it. You're like, I don't want it. I'll do it later, whatever. All of a sudden, 4:30, it's like, holy crap, I got to clean this room, or I'm not going to be able to play in the game this week, or I won't be able to go to Susie's party next weekend. And then you rush, and it looks pretty clean, but the parents come in at 6, and there's a couple things stuffed under the bed, and there's a sock over there, and there's a book that's open over there on the floor, and you forgot to put it away. And it doesn't pass 100%, but it's a lot better. That's kind of what Carolina basketball is. They don't clean the room. They wait till the last minute. Then they rush to get the room clean, but there's still a lot of stuff straggling. It looks great. Like, man, look what I just did in the last 45 minutes. But it's not satisfactory. That's kind of, I hope that wasn't a pathetic
No, that makes
analogy.
sense. I see what you're saying.
And that's kind of what they are. So at the end of the game, there's laundry on the floor. At the end of the game, there's a toy still on the pillow that was there Saturday morning when dad said, get this room clean by 6. That's what happens when you put yourself in those situations, when you put your back against the wall. And Hubert said today, boy, we always want to have our backs against the wall, like play like our backs are against the wall and have the mindset. I think right now, and I'm not saying that he's wrong in thinking that way, but I don't remember a time this year other than in rolling over a couple of patsies where this team has had a different mindset. A mindset like we need to represent what's on the front here and play like these teams have for decades, for more than a half century. Not play with your back against the wall, play in control. When your back is against the wall, you're not in total control. They need to approach games like they're in control, like it's their game. Dean Smith often wouldn't prepare a whole lot for an opponent because it was about them. If you talk to Roy Williams 2 days before a game, he wouldn't know the scouting report for the opponent because he looked at it the day before the game. I can't remember how many times in a Roy press conference, like on a Saturday afternoon after a game, someone asked about, the next 2 games or this road trip coming up. And he's like, I don't know who we're playing. I know who our next game is. I don't know who we play after that. Because he was in control of the moment. And this Carolina basketball team is not in control in the moment. So when their back is against the wall and they have to play with their hair on fire, all these attributes come out. But these are attributes that are kind of squashed and stymied in the first half, and we don't see them that much. You see Ian Jackson shake and bake and make moves. You see RJ with the most beautiful step back he's had this year, which looked like last year. You see Jalen Washington catching the ball in an oop and actually flushing instead of contorting and trying to kiss it off the glass. You see those things, but they're not there in the first half. But they are there in the second half, so they show you they can do it. You can clean your room, little Jacob Turner. If you start earlier, the room will be immaculate, and there won't be any issues at 6 o'clock when mom and dad come in, right? Mm-hmm. That's this team. And there's one guy to fix it, and he's the guy at the helm, and he's got to figure it out. And it was pretty clear that he's frustrated. I asked him if there was a sense of helplessness in some respects. And I didn't want it to sound offensive, but that's the impression I get watching this team. And I'm sure everybody watching this video or listening to us right now that cares about this team or watches them as an astute observer will say the same thing. It looks like a sense of helplessness in the first half, and the second half looks like we're trying to save our lives because the tidal wave nearly got us. Can we outrun the tidal wave? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. No, it 100% does. I think it's a great analogy, honestly, to describe what this team does, because I describe it as it's almost like a switch flips, and it's like, oh, we actually want to be here and play basketball, and we are a good team. Like, we just didn't really we didn't feel like playing those first 20 minutes, but now we're ready to do it.
But
now
Jacob, switches are all up here.
Yeah. Oh, it's all mental.
All up here.
100%.
So are they looking around the first half? There's no switch on the ball? Is it the clapper?
It's weird.
I mean, seriously, where the hell is it? It is one of the most mind-boggling things I've ever covered. Mm-hmm. Because we've seen time and time again, doesn't have to be that way. It's not like they just don't have talent and they're going to get blown away and that's that. This isn't the 8-20 team. All right? This is a club that should be an NCAA tournament team, but right now they're not. They're not even close. If the tournament came out today, they wouldn't even be in the conversation for it. In fact, nobody in the league would except.
That's a good point.
League sucks. But anyway, and that's another thing we'll talk about later in the week because they needed these games. But that's it. It starts up here, and it starts when the clock is at 20 the first time, not the second time.
Let's talk about where this team goes from here, because I mentioned earlier, 6-5. You are 1-0 in ACC play, so you still got that going for you a little bit. It's a bad league, but you got that going for you. UCLA up on Saturday, 18th ranked UCLA, I should say, in Madison Square Garden. That, again, not going to be an easy one. It's not a game Carolina can show up and play like they have in first half so far this season against good teams, because just tell you straight up, AJ, they'll lose the game. It's just what we've seen this year. So there's opportunities. Not a lot left before you hit conference play, but this is an opportunity, again, to get a win that Carolina so desperately needs. But when you look at how this team's playing, and you look at the tale of two halves conversation we've had multiple times this year, when they can be a really bad basketball team in the first 20 minutes and a pretty dang good-looking basketball team in the last 20 minutes, but they don't start games well, AJ, and they don't finish games well. That's a problem. And I tweeted it in the first half, AJ, and I think – This is another problem that this team has that we're kind of hitting out here. AJ, this is a guard-heavy team that struggles to shoot the ball from three-point land. That's a problem. They're not dominant enough inside. They can't start games 0 for 11 from three-point land. There's these little things that need to get fixed. But I also look at it and think, well, if they just come out and play with that intensity like we saw in the second half, you can mask a lot of these problems that you may have. And it's not rocket science. We've seen it happen a few times this year against good teams, I might add. So where does this team go from here? There's a lot of people who, I don't want to say given up on the season, but they're like, I think given up a little bit on this team. I'm not quite there yet, but man, it's a team that's trending in the wrong direction. We're only 11 games in, AJ. This is the 11th game of the year.
Yeah, we'll explore this in the basketball show tomorrow, but you said mask the problems. I think a way to mask the problems is to accentuate the positives. Mm-hmm. And watching them in the first half, and I had a tweet that people are probably still responding to about the way they run half-court offense. They don't run good half-court offense. There's one or two guys moving. When you are smaller almost across the board in every spot than your opponent, and they start smaller, especially with Drake Powell at the 4. He shouldn't be starting at the 4. 4 games now, Drake is a starter. He hadn't done much. He's come off the bench again. Hubert needs to make another switch because he's got to keep doing something, right?
Yeah.
So they're smaller across the board in every spot in the starting lineup. So you must – what would naturally someone's inclination be is say, okay, that's their strength, quickness, movement, forcing the other team to defend, making longer legs defend more space. They don't do that. One of the reasons they don't shoot well in the first half of games is because the shots are contested. It's very predictable. You go back and look at the last possession of the first half today. Florida knew exactly what they were going to do. knew exactly what they were going to do, and it was dribble, dribble, dribble. Seth gets the ball, dribble, dribble, contested three. They had all the time in the world to run some stuff, run some curls, run guards through the lane and come out on the other end. We're talking 1978 basketball camp offense, okay? Pass, cut away. Go through the lane, come out the other end. Someone else is cutting too. They don't do that, and I think that's one of the issues. One of the issues is that they're not accentuating their positives. Run teams, you can be quick in the half court. You can constantly set screens. If you, and I'm older than most people, than a lot of people watching, but if you remember P.D. Carrill's Princeton teams back in the day, like when they upset UCLA and when they almost beat Georgetown, they were nowhere near as big, but they made them guard. They used their strengths to expose some weaknesses on the opponent. We don't see Carolina doing that. We see them trying to run an offense as if they're just as tall as they've always been, just as skilled down low as they've always been. And it's not working. So you're going to have quick threes. A lot of the threes guys took today in the first half, catch and shoot right away. I mean, they didn't. The one that Cade Tyson took from the corner, one of the guys in the media sitting next to me said it was like he shot it, let it go before he was finished with the shot.
I remember that. I actually know what you're talking about.
So the release point's here, but it's here instead of here. Of course he missed it. Drake Powell, the air ball. I mean, it was as if he had a time bomb in his hand. So, and I'm not being critical of Drake. It's just, I think that the approach, and that's why the positives with the LaSalle game, it was all about not the result, but the approach. But they felt their oats because it was LaSalle. It's like they felt their oats against American. A lot of stuff needs to be fixed. They need to fix their approach. They are not a good half-court team. I was telling you guys, and I was telling you, Jacob, back when they were in Maui, that this team's offense is a huge problem. Hubert says, we score enough points. No, it's how you go about it. And how often does your offense lead to points for the opponent as well?
Yeah.
They're not a good half-court offensive team. They've got really talented guards who you can see the pained looks on their faces because nothing's there. But nothing's there because sometimes all three of them are standing still. And you got a 6'8" guy trying to post up, and then you got a 6'6", 180-pound, 175-pound four over in the corner, kind of not being guarded because teams aren't going to respect him that much. You know, in the second half, I will say this about Cade Tyson, who did not score tonight, but Todd Golden, the Florida coach after the game, specifically mentioned Tyson about how they were uber focused on Tyson and RJ. So when Tyson was in the game for a long stretch, when Carolina was playing very well in the second half, they were out there guarding him. So there was a little more space. That's why a lot of those guard drives in the second half only had one defender. Ian Jackson never had to deal with a second defender on those drives.
Yeah.
And then Cade went out, and then suddenly everything changed, and they couldn't score. And I'm not saying it's simply because of that, but this is how guys play off of guys. And I think that there's a lot of figuring out that needs to be done from an approach standpoint and also the psychological up here. This team is not in a good place right now, and they are basically – you talk about back against the wall. If they don't beat UCLA, they're going to have to win 16 or 17 games in the ACC to have a shot.
I know.
Because the league is atrocious. If John Rothstein wants to talk Mountain West over ACC this year, go right ahead, man. Do it every minute because you're not wrong. The Atlantic 10's probably better. I'm serious. It's horrible. It's the worst it's ever been. So maybe they win a lot of games in the league because it's bad, but I don't know, man. This club doesn't have that. You said the switch earlier. I'm trying to think of what it might be. Like it needs a Flint.
It needs something.
Flint. I was actually coming. I ran down to see if I had a Ethernet connector in my bag in the press room. I was coming out, and the team was coming out of the locker room before the game, and they got the boombox. And I think it was Ty Claude may have been carrying. The boombox is like the size of Rhode Island.
Probably huge, yeah. And
they're dancing. They got this energy, and they got a good vibe. Well, they need to substitute the boombox for a giant Flint that if you're in survival mode somewhere in the middle of the wilderness with Survivor Man or Bear Grylls or one of those characters, that it's a giant flint that will save your life. That's what they need instead of a boombox. They need a flint to get that thing going so all the positives then come out and can be accentuated.
Yeah, man. It's a team that's got a lot of problems. It's low on confidence. And like you just kind of talked about a little bit, doesn't particularly look very well coached right now either. Maybe that changes. But right now, I
think it's because he's having a hard time. I mean, he said, I don't know.
Yeah, that's just not
every great coach. I'm not saying he's a great coach. Let me just say this very quickly so people understand. Every great coach goes through periods where they have a team and I don't know. It happens. Go check out 1990s Dean Smith team. All right? Roy had a couple of those. Every one of them has that, and I'm not calling Hubert a great coach. What I'm saying now is he's in I don't know mode right now, 11 games in. They've got 2 non-conference games left.
Mm-hmm.
And the head coach is in I don't know mode, and the players are in I don't know mode. So the writers, the fans, we're kind of in I don't know mode, but we're looking at this I don't know, and we're saying, okay, well, we see all these things, but we don't know how to fix it either because we're not part of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
They got to figure it out somehow.
Yeah, they do. Whether they do or not, I think is something that firmly remains a to be determined situation. And we're just going to have to see how it plays out, man. But yeah, not a very good basketball team right now. Another loss, 90-84 to Florida in the Jumpman Invitational. Again, Carolina falling to 6-5, Florida improving to 11-0. So having a really nice start to the season for the Gators and quite the opposite for North Carolina. We'll be back on Saturday, obviously, for another 3 things. As Carolina takes on UCLA in Madison Square Garden. We'll also plan on doing a bit of a basketball show tomorrow, and we'll have some more drops coming this week too. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Keep it locked to charliestrade.com for all your coverage of UNC football, basketball, and recruiting, including this game. Head on over there. We got articles and interviews and
watch the RJ interview.
Yeah, columns. Yeah, you can see the RJ interview on our YouTube channel along with Hubert and some more players as well. So go check that out after this one's done. And it is about done. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. We appreciate you guys watching as always. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell too. So you know every single time we upload. See y'all next time. Thanks.